Hey and welcome to this Werewolf tanking guide. Werewolf tank can be very fun to play. When built correctly, it can also provide many of the same debuffs a regular tank would. It's also much simpler than regular tanks because it has only one skill bar. It has some unique group utility such as the Feeding Frenzy synergy. It also has decent damage mitigation and access to an incredible self heal. There are 3 ways to become a werewolf: getting bitten by another player at one of the werewolf shrines in the Rift, Bankurai or Reaper's March, shown on the screen. Try asking your friends, your guild, or zone chat in those zones. Getting bitten by rare ads that spawn in the Rift, Bankurai or Reaper's March in places shown on the screen. But they're rare, and I mean really rare. I've never seen one and I've been playing ESO for 2 years, so I would advise against that option. Buying Werewolf's Bite from Crown Store, but it's ridiculously overpriced and I would advise against it. You can easily get a bite from another player if you ask around a bit. Let's start off with class choice. You obviously can't use any class abilities, so we're gonna take a look at class passives that will work in your werewolf form. Dragon Knight. Scaled Armor. Increases armor by 1650, which is approximately 3.5% damage mitigation. Iron Skin. Increases the amount of damage you can block by 10%. Since weapon passives don't work on a werewolf, you will struggle with block mitigation, and that passive will be really helpful. Combustion increases damage of poison and burning status effects, and restores 1000 stamina when proccing poisoned and 1000 magicka when proccing burning. Werewolf doesn't have any poison or flame damage on their own, but this passive can still be useful. Balanced Warrior. Increases weapon and spell damage by 6% and armor by 1320, which translates to roughly 3% damage mitigation. Very useful for a tank. Restoring Spirit. Reduces cost of all abilities by 5%. Again, a very useful passive. Nightblade. Master Assassin. 2974 bonus penetration while flanking. Not really useful for a tank. Executioner. Restores 1000 magicka and stamina when an enemy dies within 2 seconds of being damaged by you. Very useful, especially on trash. Refreshing Shadows. 15% increased magicka, stamina and health recovery. Also very useful. You can also cast Grim Focus before transforming, and you keep the stacks until death or instance change. But additional damage is not important enough for a tank to matter in class choice. Sorcerer. Unholy Knowledge. 6% reduce magicka, stamina and health cost of non-core abilities. Core abilities are Block, Dodgel, Bash and Break Free. These are not affected by this passive. Persistence. After Block, your next magicka, stamina or health ability costs 15% less. Useful. Capacitor. 10% magicka recovery. Very useful. Energized. 5% more physical and shock damage. Not very useful for a tank. Amplitude. 1% increased damage for every remaining 10% health on the target. Again, not useful for a tank. Warden. Maturation. Grants minor toughness when you heal someone. You'll only be healing yourself, so that's just 10% max health bonus for yourself. It's good, but you can also get it from other wardens, which will most likely be the case in 12-man content. Glacial Presence. 10% more crit damage on enemies that have recently been chilled, and 10% more crit healing on allies that have recently been chilled. Basically useless. Icy Aura. Snares on you are 15% less effective, also mostly useless. Piercing Cold. 10% increased magic and frost damage, useless. Necromancer. Rapid Rot. Increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 15%, mostly useless. Last Gasp. Increases max health by 1250, useful. Curative Curse. 8% increased healing done while you have a negative effect on you, slightly useful. So let's sum it up now, while also ignoring bonuses that are less important for a tank. Dragon Knight gets 1650 armor, which is approximately 3.5% damage reduction, 10% block mitigation, and additional sustain if running certain enchants. Templar gets 1320 armor, approximately 3% damage reduction, and 5% skill cost reduction. Nightblade gets Resource Restore when recently damaged enemies die, and 15% bonus to all recoveries. Sorcerer gets 6% skill cost reduction, that excludes core abilities, 15% cost reduction on next skill after blocking, and 10% bonus magicka recovery. Warden gets 10% max health buff, that can also be applied by another Warden ally. Necromancer gets 1250 max health, and 8% healing done while being debuffed. Dragon Knight is a clear winner here. Templar comes second, then Sorcerer, Nightblade, Necromancer, and Warden comes last. This of course doesn't mean that you have to be a Dragon Knight, but is the most optimal and easiest option. Later on I will talk about choosing between dual wield and one-handed shield. If you choose dual wield, then the best race choice will be Nord. Their ultimate generation passive will be wasted, but the armor bonus is needed to reach armor cap on Werewolf. If you choose one-handed shield, you'll have enough armor without Nord passive, and you can choose something else, such as Imperial, Wood Elf, Khajiit or Breton. Werewolf doesn't have access to bar swaps, and you're forced into the same setup of 5 skills, plus the ultimate ability. The only choice you can make here is about morphs, so let's go over all the skills and all their morphs. Pounce. It's 2 abilities in one. The first cast is a leap that deals bleed damage to a single target. Within 5 seconds after casting Pounce, you can also cast Carnage, which applies Dot to a single target that deals bleed damage. Deals more damage based on your target's missing health. The leap part of its ability, combined with the Tormentor set, will be your taunt. Feral Pounce morph causes you to restore tiny amount of stamina with both parts of the skill. It also extends the duration of your werewolf transformation. Brutal Pounce morph changes the first part of the skill into a small AoE around your target, letting you taunt multiple enemies, and changes the second part of the skill into a cone that increases your weapon and spell damage for each enemy hit. Brutal Pounce is the default option here. Feral Pounce might have some niche use in trials where you want to make sure you don't taunt enemies you're not supposed to taunt. Since the Tormentor set requires you to deal damage with leap to taunt, you will be totally unable to taunt invulnerable enemies, which will be an issue in some places. You can't leap on flying enemies such as Lady Thorn or Lord Falgraven in some phases, so you can't taunt them. Leaping will make you drop your block for a moment. Hircin's Bounty. Your self-heal and your only magicka costing ability. Restores stamina when cast at full health. Hircin's Rage. When cast at full health grants you Major Berserk, but increases your damage taken. Hircin's Fortitude. Increases the healing done by this ability and increases your health and stamina recovery based on the healing caused. There's a clear distinction here between a damage dealer morph and a tank morph. Hircin's Fortitude is of course the tank morph. Roar. An AoE fear that also sets enemies off balance. Ferocious Roar. Increases speed of your heavy attacks after casting. Deafening Roar. Applies Major Breach and Minor Maim. Deafening Roar should be your default option. Major Breach's penetration translates into roughly 10% damage increase, so you need to keep that debuff up. In very organized groups, where you know for sure that someone else will provide Major Breach, for example with Necromancer's Boneyard, you can use Ferocious Roar to make it easier for yourself. Heavy attacking enemies that are set off balance restores double the amount of resources. Combined with Pursuit passive, heavy attacking enemies that are set off balance will allow you to restore huge amounts of stamina. Piercing Howl. A ranged attack that deals physical damage. Deals increased damage to enemies facing you. Howl of Despair allows one of your allies to use the Feeding Frenzy synergy, which grants them Empower for 5 seconds, increasing damage of their light and heavy attacks by 40%. Howl of Agony increases the damage bonus against enemies facing you and makes it so that bonus is also applied to feared enemies. Howl of Despair is the better morph here. Boosting your teammates' damage will be a bigger overall DPS increase than boosting your own damage. By providing a synergy, you also boost their sustain thanks to the % base chance to proc standard status effect, which applies Minor Breach for 4 seconds. Infectious Claws. Deals direct disease damage in a cone, applies disease status effect to all enemies hit, and applies disease dot to them for 10 seconds. Claws of Anguish morph also afflicts enemies with Major Defile, decreasing their healing taken by 16%. Claws of Life morph heals you for the damage done with the damage over time part of the skill. Claws of Life is the better choice even though it doesn't heal for much, because healing reduction doesn't work against NPCs, so Claws of Anguish morph is useless. Werewolf Transformation, the ultimate ability that transforms you into a werewolf. Werewolf Berserker morph is the DPS oriented morph, which causes your light attacks to apply a bleed and causes your heavy attacks to damage enemies in a cone in front of you. Pack Leader morph is the support and survivability oriented morph, which causes you to take reduced damage, grants your allies minor courage, which increases their weapon and spell damage, and summons 2 dire wolves. Pack Leader is obviously the morph you want to choose. The dire wolves are very useful because they attack very fast and they deal direct physical damage, which has 10% base chance to proc Sunder status effect. If you're wearing 2 charged weapons, these wolves will keep up 90% Minor Breach entirely on their own. Gear. The first set you absolutely need is Tormentor, otherwise you won't be able to taunt anything. The second set I'd recommend is Turning Tide, which allows you to apply major vulnerability to enemies, increasing their damage taken by 10%. If you want to swap gear between fights, you can also use Rushing Agony, so you can actually stack trash packs, but it's not necessary. As for monster set, there's only one chase that will buff your group's DPS, and it's Boulder of Ruin, but you have to activate it before you transform because you can't crouch in werewolf form. Since it only takes one gear slot, you can use one piece Magma Incarnate or one piece Trainee along with it. Monster sets that will help your group through boosting survivability or sustain are Sentinel over Kugams, Lord Warden, and Vykosa. Monster sets that will help only you through boosting survivability or sustain are Engine Guardian and Scorch Harvester. Now let's take a look at weights, traits, and enchants. It doesn't matter how you arrange the sets since Werewolf has only one bar. Reinforce is recommended for pieces with high base armor. On pieces with small armor you can use either Divines, Sturdy, Well-Fitted, or Nirnhound. As a base, I'd advise to use 2 one-handed weapons with charged traits. The type of weapon doesn't matter because weapon passives don't work in werewolf form. Having 2 charged weapons will allow you to keep up 90% of minor breach debuff with just your dire wolves and various other debuffs with just your weapon enchants. The enchants you can put on your weapons are Shock, that will keep up minor vulnerability which increases damage taken by 5%. Absorb Magicka or Prismatic enchant, that will keep up minor Magicka still, which restores Magicka to you and allies who damage the target. Poison, which will restore stamina if you're a Dragon Knight. Flame, which will restore Magicka if you're a Dragon Knight. Absorb Stamina, if you wanna be certain that minor breach will have 100% uptime. But dire wolves on their own are keeping around 90% and you can fill the gaps with Hall of Despair. On your body pieces you want to use Tri-Stat enchants, and on your jewelry, Tri-Stat cost reduction. The dual wield setup is way stronger, but it can be inconvenient because it makes it difficult to play in your human form, so you have to charge ultimate before every dungeon. If you want to be able to play in your human form, you can also, if you want to see skill setups to use in your human form, you can take a look at my DK, Necro or Warden tanking guides. In organized 12-man trials, someone has to keep up the Crusher enchant. If you wanna do that, your ability and minor Magicka steal. Champion points. In the blue tree you want to use all the mitigation CPs as a base to start from, and you can stick to that setup without losing much. If you want you can also tailor it more to specific fights. For example, if a boss fight doesn't have any damage over time you can drop Enduring Resolve, and the same applies to other slottables. In those cases, in the red tree you always want to slot Boundless Vitality, Fortified, and Rejuvenation. For trash, your last slottable will be Celerity, and for boss fights, Bracing Anchor. If you don't want to swap your CP to Magicka, you'll have to put some points into Stamina to make sure that it's higher than Magicka, so that combats the recoveries by 30%. You can craft it by combining Columbine, Bugloss, and Mountain Flowers. And your heavy attacks are faster if you choose Ferocious Roarmorph, and since your kit contains only 5 skills, making it really frustrating in trash. If you're doing format content with friends, it might be a good idea to ask someone to use chains instead of you. You can easily taunt everything off them afterwards thanks to your AoE taunt. You can all I have to say about Werewolf Tank. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and if you want to see more of my tanking content like guides, trifecta achievements and world records, feel free to subscribe to my channel.